Okay, welcome everyone to the MyXC How to Coach presentation. We're going to go over how to be a successful youth ski coach using a games-based approach. And this is for our Ski Sparks Ski for Fun program, which covers ages 4 to 14. Thank you for being part of our community. The vision of the Minnesota Youth Ski League is to create a world passionate about access to outdoor recreation, winter, and lifelong health for all. And our mission is to empower youth to be joyful, confident winter enthusiasts by building inclusive communities that reduce barriers to cross-country skiing. And we do that by holding 5 values: lifelong health, accessibility, connections, fun, and transformation. The skill levels, MYSL is structured with 6 skill levels, but we also last year added what we call 3 stars, which is an older beginner level. Now, not every club will have an older 3-star level. It depends on how the registration, how the membership falls out for each of the different locations. In fact, one of the things we'll be refining next year is not every club has skating levels either. So some clubs only have classic levels. The other change we made that is relatively new is our level 1 is only 4 and 5-year-olds. So basically, if any skier that is 4 or 5 at the end of the year, or December 31st, right before programming starts, if they're 4 or 5, they should be in level 1. One thing that's a little unique, not unique, it's actually has a lot of research behind it. We teach kids how to classic before they skate. So one thing we do not do is allow beginner skiers directly into our skate levels. So if someone comes to MYSL and they're beginning skier, they have to start with a classic level before they skate, because we need them to have an idea of the balance, the one-legged glide, the rhythm, and that's also where we teach more of the uphill and downhill technique and using the edges. And it makes skating much easier if you have a handle on those things. Program design. Our programs are designed using the concepts of the long-term development model, which is a national public health initiative researched and developed by the Canadian government. It's a fantastic model. It's probably 20 years old at this point. And every single sport in Canada has to model their programming using this research. So you can see on this chart, we kind of cover the active start and primarily the fundamentals. We don't, our Ski Works program ventures into the learn to train phase, but we're primarily focusing on this fundamental phase. And what we're trying to accomplish through this program design is creating lifelong skiers. That sounds simple, but it's not as easy as one might think. It is a combination of the right exposure at the right time and the engagement of families and the community. Those are 2 extremely critical factors. And I will add a third one. There's actually an article that links here, but the third factor is introducing a kid and making sure that a skier sticks with it through their growth spurt, because then they're more in touch with the coordination they're going to end up with as an adult. So there's lots of information online about this, but we also have some codes to the training module. So if you're interested in learning more, email me and I can get you a code to do their revamped training module. That's maybe 2 or 3 years old, but a lot of information online about the LTD. So legal requirements for coaches. So the first requirement is that you need to fill out our volunteer registration form, and we collect information on that form that allows us to do background checks. And then the second requirement is taking the abuse prevention and athlete well-being training, which is a short online course that we wrote in-house, so it's very specific to skiing and our programming. And then after you take the main course in subsequent years, you can take the shorter refresher course. And both of those include a small quiz. And then the third requirement is the Heads Up CDC concussion course. And that requirement is every 3 years. So I want to point out that these are actual legal requirements. These are not things that we just made up on our own. So every youth sport should be doing these things. And we're really proud of the work we've done to kind of be a leader in our field of getting everyone registered and tracking these trainings. A little bit about on-snow safety. The biggest concern that we're worried about is actually the effect of weather and being outside in the cold. So you want to make sure no one's getting frostbite. You want to be aware of wind chill. You want to be aware of kids with no hat or no muff when it's cold out. Or for some reason, if they get wet, they should probably head inside, or you find a parent if, for example, they step in a puddle, that sort of thing, things that can be dangerous then for getting cold. We want to try to keep the groups together the best we can, which is why we have a designated role of sweeper. And what sweeper means is someone that just brings up the rear so we don't have kids that get left behind. And another huge part of safety is making sure that your equipment and your skiers' equipment is functional and fits well. And as you see in this picture here, most of the young kids, I would say level 1, level 2, will not be able to put their skis on by themselves. So you'll have to help with that as well. And then trail etiquette is a big part of safety. And the biggest part of trail etiquette is going the correct way on the trails. Ski trails are rarely marked sufficiently. And so you really want to look at a map ahead of time, especially if you're not super familiar with the area that you're skiing. But on a crowded trail or on any of the snowmaking loops, it's really critical that you don't go the wrong way, that you are always following the rules of the trail. Even if you see other people going the wrong way, we need to go the correct way always, even if you're coaching and doing drills or a little loop, because we are very highly visible and we will hear about it if we are not following the rules. And then just general trail etiquette is great for the community as well. So saying hi when people go by, staying to the side whenever you can, only using part of the lesson area when possible instead of the whole thing, that sort of thing. Okay, I'm going to move on. So a little bit about group dynamics. As a coach, you want to try to have eye contact when possible, and that can often mean going down on a knee and getting at the child's level. You want to stand in the middle of a line or an arc so everyone can see and hear you. And this is an important one. You only talk to the group when you're facing them. So if you're demonstrating technique and skiing away, you can't be talking at the same time because no one will hear you. So please just make sure that you're looking at your group when you're talking to them. And you want to try to keep the sun out of their eyes. So if you're asking them to look at you or look at a junior coach, someone that's demonstrating technique, make sure they're not squinting into the sun. And as I just said, if you're lucky enough to have junior coaches in your group, that's a great way to have a technique demonstration. Don't feel that you as the coach have to be the one that demonstrates the technique. So make sure they can hear you. Take the time to ask a skier's name. Most of them will have name cards on the bibs. You don't have to remember the name, but asking the name creates a connection between you and the skier, and they know that you care about them if you take the time to ask the name. And then it's also great if you can look for other opportunities throughout the session to talk individually to the skiers to ask a question or make a small question or just check in. Ask what if they have a pet at home, ask what their favorite ice cream is, because then if they are nervous about the group or with working with you, they'll become much more comfortable once they get to meet you a little bit. How a child learns. So our youngest level ones and some of the younger level twos, 6 and under, they need a very single and simple focus. They will play individually, so not in big group complicated games. And then we want brief, large muscle movement tasks, and they learn by watching and doing. And so for this age group, we're talking about follow the leader, hokey pokey, things that can be easily organized and called out. And they will learn by watching you or other skiers. For ages 7 through 12, they are starting to have clearer boundaries, and they have a well-defined focus. They want supportive and inclusive group activities. They learn through experience and interaction, so they can you can use more words with this age group. And their self-worth is tied to accomplishment. So you want to make sure you're verbally rewarding accomplishment. You want to use a lot of the do words and tell them what they're doing right. And then our teens, they're more focused on individual goals achieved through group activities. And so they're a little more me focused. They appreciate being treated as young adults. And you have to sometimes watch out for their abilities regressing due to growth spurts, which is often demonstrated as a frustration in their eyes. So something that was easy for them the prior year might not be easy the next year if they are a foot taller now. And so it'll take some time and just help them have patience to get used to their new shapes of their bodies. Attending to a child's needs, because skiing is a bit of a complicated sport because we are outside on a slippery surface with equipment, with, I'll call it awkward equipment, and weather that can have all sorts of factors, wind, snow, dampness. It's very hard to teach a child anything unless we know that some basic needs are met, including this is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but first of all, we need to know that they're warm enough, that they're not hungry, and these are all concerns of the coach, because it will be hard to teach them anything if we don't address these. So, what can you do about that? You can have a snack in your pocket. You can have interaction with parents. You can be preemptive in, again, making sure that a child has their hat pulled down over their ears, that sort of thing. And then as we go further up the triangle, that safety aspect of what we're talking about here is not necessarily making sure that everything around you is safe, but making sure that the child feels safe. And they will feel safe if they have more of a connection to you and they are trusting you. And so that's where those interactions come in when you're asking the child's name and they get to know you. And then we can move up the triangle to creating friendships in the group. And then as the child gets older, they will develop esteem. And then eventually that leads up to the tip of self-fulfillment. I won't linger on that, but the reason I put that slide in here is because really to emphasize that we're in a challenging environment, which we can't completely ignore. So some do's and don'ts in general for all coaches is do make adjustments to the plan during a session based on snow conditions, weather, and the children's interests. So it's skiing, the snow can change a lot, and you can't plan 2 weeks ahead of time and expect everything, the perfect snow conditions to be there when you show up. So you always have to be a little bit flexible and work with what you have. You do want to give encouraging words from start to finish, seeing the kids. So what I mean by that is always try to use do phrases, and you want to limit telling a kid to not do something. So we're trying to avoid saying, you know, don't swing your pole like that. Instead, you want to tell them how you want them to be swinging their poles. We don't want to talk too much, especially with the younger kids. That will not be effective. So we need to focus the games, teach by action, not by complicated explanations. Don't be sarcastic. That usually goes way over the head of most of our young skiers. And don't let the skiers get cold. So don't be stubborn about your lesson plan if everybody's standing in the wind and getting cold. Get them skiing and get them into the woods, and you can come back to your lesson area to do your activities once everybody's warmed up. And don't force an unwilling child to participate. You do have to keep the child within your group, and hopefully the sweeper can attend. But if a child, for example, doesn't want to participate in a group game and they just want to sit and watch, that's fine. Or you could try to engage them with a different role, like being the referee or the goalie for a game or something like that. But if a child doesn't want to participate, there's not anything you can do to force them to participate unless it becomes a safety hazard. Like I said, you can't obviously leave them behind. So essential skills for all skiing can really be narrowed down to 6 things. Only 6 things. Classic skating, it's the same. This is it. These are the 6 essential skills that you need. So one is being able to get up after you fall down. The second one I'm going to say is one-legged glide, which is also called balance or weight transfer. The third one is arm swing. So the arms have to swing like pendulums from the shoulders. We do not lift our hands ever. It is always a swing. There's a natural rhythm that you have to be able to repeat. That's very important for skiing. We need an understanding of our edges for going uphill and for turning. And we need to understand wedges, which is how we change direction and slow down going downhill. Now, on the picture on the right here, this is maybe a 9 or 10-year-old boy, and beautiful classic technique. You'll see there's one point of contact on the ground. So one foot is on the ground, back foot completely off the ground, and both hands, our poles are off the ground as well. So that's complete weight transfer. That's one-legged glide. That's arm swing. That's rhythm. Most adults, most of you that are coaching, probably don't have technique that looks this nice. But this is the goal of where we're trying to get all of the children that we're teaching. And this skier did not get here by being told how to change his ski technique or what technique to use. This skill is developed through focused games and having fun and playing on skis, because most skiers want to go fast, even if it's just for 10 seconds. And to do that, if they're given the right tools and the right equipment, they'll figure a lot out on their own. But again, this is very good technique. And I will say still pretty rare in our overall community if you are looking at adults and juniors and youth. And there are probably more kids in MYSL that can ski this well than juniors on high school teams. But hopefully we can change that and get everyone skiing this beautifully. So arm swing leads to rhythm. So the skier on the left is maybe 4 or 5. And all we work on in level 1 is arm swing. So we don't use poles at all ever in level 1. We're really focusing on the arm swing. So arm swing is important for a lot of reasons, but it primarily produces glide and weight transfer. It must be practiced before poles are introduced, and then you must continue to practice it throughout all levels. And most days actually that we ski for MYSL, there will be some aspect of the session where you're not using poles. It's good for adult learners, it's good for everybody to practice without poles. If you give the poles too early, they will hinder the arm swing. So people start lifting them up and picking them up rather than letting the hands swing with the poles. And also a pro tip that works really well is if you have cold hands, or if you have a skier that tends to have cold hands, if you take the poles away and have them ski with aggressive arm swing, the hands will warm up really quickly. Okay, and then we were talking about edges to go uphill. And also a note here to be creative about your terrain. It doesn't have to be on a groomed ski trail. You can find lots of terrain off to the side or on side hills. It doesn't necessarily have to be on trail to practice some of these things. And downhill wedges for control. So this is a really good skill development feature here where they put cones on a downhill. So the skier has to be in control and changing directions. And then to get the mind off of the feet, they also get to catch a Nerf ball. Fantastic skill development. And a note about hills. Kids think hills are fun. So oftentimes we have adults that are beginner or intermediate coaches, assistants, or sweepers, and they might actually be slightly afraid of the hills, which is fine. But we want to try not to project that fear of the hills onto the kids. The children, they have a lower center of gravity and not as much momentum as somebody that's heavier, which is one of the reasons they're not afraid of the hills. But also we've already taught them how to fall and get up. So they think hills are fun, and there's no reason for them to think otherwise. I will, so I guess what I'm saying is don't shelter kids from terrain. There's no terrain in any place that we have an MYSL club that most kids can't handle. So they should be exposed to all of that terrain. There's no reason not to do that. And if you don't have what you might call challenging terrain at your facility, you should try to make small hills or bumps a little more challenging, so the skier is developing skills that will help them when they go somewhere with bigger hills. So you can ski on one leg, you can do, jumps on little bumps, whatever it is, to really make sure that your skiers are comfortable on all sorts of hills. And now on to skating. So we have a couple of nice pictures here. Especially the skier on the left is quite young, maybe 10 years old, very good technique, squarely over the gliding ski, riding a bent knee, square shoulders, hands not behind the hips, good extension with the kick. You can see that in both, all those things in both photos. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but it's very difficult to find attractive pictures of skating, because usually we're in such awkward positions when we're trying to skate that you're like, geez, is that really what I look like when I'm skating? These pictures here demonstrate, what really nice skate technique can look like. And again, this is the goal for kids. It doesn't mean they can do this for 50K, but they can do it when they're playing around. They can do a developmentally appropriate race distance and hold this technique. So that's what we're going for. And we start all this out by just general movement on skis. So it doesn't have to look like skiing when we start out. It can be any sort of motion or movement on skis, because you're always learning a lot when you have the skis on your feet and you're sliding around on the snow. So you can work on perfecting rhythm and multi-directional movement. The movement can be dynamic. And when I say dynamic, I mean things like jumping and hopping. Rhythm can be worked on gradually. So you can start short and then go on to longer distances. And here we are again with the poles. We want to drop the poles every day. So every session should include some activities or games without the poles, because it teaches fantastic use of the legs and weight transfer. And this is where a lot of the games come in. So a lot of the learning that we do in MYSL is through games, because games naturally teach the use of edges when you're trying to change directions, starting and stopping, which also uses the edges, but teaches you how to lower your center of gravity as well, weight transfer, and body position. So we don't ever say these words to the kids, but we give them the challenge of a game or an activity, and they learn them naturally. And again, any activity on skis will teach valuable skills. If you can build a snowman with your skis on, great. You're learning a lot about walking around in the snow and your edges, and where your skis are and how not to step on other people, and all sorts of great stuff. You can play tag, you can do relays, you can do human slalom. We'll go over a lot of this in the curriculum, but my point here is that any activity, any game with skis on, you are learning skills. Here's an example of an obstacle course, but in general, my point is a few cones can go a long way to making a fun little course for kids. And scooters. So scooters are the bread and butter of many of our Ski Sparks activities and games. And a scooter is when one ski is on and one ski is off. And this teaches good kicking technique, because the kick goes straight down into the snow, and full weight transfer, because you won't glide at all unless you have all of your weight on the ski foot. It also is a great way to build confidence in the skiers, because it's most skiers can be successful at scooter right away versus sliding around on two skis, which might be a little challenging. So it builds confidence and makes the child understand that that they can be good at this. And to emphasize learning through play, most of you know that the skier on the left is Olympic gold medalist Jessie Diggins. And this is a picture of a classic sprint race that she's doing from a few years ago. And you'll see here, she's flying around a corner, nothing's on the ground right there, you know. And then we have a boy on the right who's playing at a Ski Sparks session. And he looks the same as the Olympic gold medalist. So my point here is, it's not necessarily, 30 years of elite level training that teaches somebody to sprint like that. It's playing on their skis when they were young that teaches them how to ski like that. So some common problems and corrections for classic skiing. Shuffling, and that's when a skier is unable to balance on one ski. The correction is scooters, because it naturally forces them to get all that weight onto the gliding ski. Pole basket planting ahead of foot. So that's when the pole kind of drifts forward. And the correction for that is to drag the poles loosely with arm swing behind you, and then gradually start putting the baskets into the snow, with the goal of the baskets being planted eventually near the toes. Slipping or slapping skis, and that's the back foot coming down too soon. So if you're skiing along and you hear like a beaver slap on the snow, that is not good technique. That is actually you or your skier losing your balance. And so the correction for that is scooters, again, to work on the balance and the weight transfer. And then my fourth most common problem is poor rhythm. So the arms and legs are not alternating properly. And the correction there is to take off the poles and work on the arm swing. So most skiers will have the ability to naturally pick up the arm swing without the poles and the proper rhythm and the alternating hands and legs. But if you put the poles in their hands when they're learning, they will get confused and sometimes lose the rhythm. So then if they can't get it with the poles, you take the poles away and do more practice without the poles. And common problems and corrections for skating. So again, slipping and skier not able to kick off. You have to use much more of an edge in skating. And the correction for that is legs only. And then you can move to snakes or figure eights to emphasize edging. Because again, the edges is what you need to kick off of for skating. Pulling is awkward or timing is not right. This is usually because the balance needs to be reinforced. So we're going to take the poles away again and do more legs only skiing and games. Over rotation of torso, which causes the ski to fall out, to stall out, excuse me. And here the correction is activities and drills with short pulling motions, which is typically short relays or little sprints. And we want to emphasize hands stopping at the hips. So in general, in skating, you don't want your hands to ever go behind your hips. And the fourth one, legs too straight, kick not effective. The correction, short sprints and relays, teaches acceleration, and the skier will naturally drop their center of gravity for a more effective kick. So if you tell someone to do, a 10-second sprint, they'll typically just figure that out on their own because it will become evident how to get going quickly. And then new for this winter, we have done a complete redo of the curriculum. It will be probably, it's going to be an app, first of all, but we'll still work on a way to print each day and each level, because I know not everyone is going to want to be looking at their phone. And we will be releasing that probably a week before the January 1st start date for most clubs. And what this new curriculum focuses on is simplifying. So fewer words, but references when needed. We're going to have time estimates for each section of the lesson plan. And then cues, which are verbal kind of what to say. So when we give you a fundamental activity to focus on, we will give you the verbal cues to say with those activities. So we don't leave that up to you what to say to the kids. And the reason we're giving those cues is twofold. One is what we call movement analysis, kind of seeing where your skiers are at. But the other one is making the terminology age appropriate. So for example, we don't talk to 5-year-olds using the word parallel. We have other ways of doing that. We can say train track, or if we want them to wedge, we can say make your skis look like a piece of pizza. And so we'll give you a few of those clues. And then the lessons will have a new structure. So we'll have a warm-up, which might include a dynamic movement, and then we'll have a fundamental activity, usually 1 to 2, and then a dynamic activity, which we'll have 2 or 3 of those. And then a section for games that the coaches and skiers can pick from that support the activities that were already worked on. Then you can go for a little ski, and then you have a wrap up where you actually reinforce the activities that you worked on at the beginning of the session. A short one slide here on special considerations for special skiers. So we do allow any of these we'll call special skiers into our clubs without a lot of rigmarole, let's say. So a standing limb deficient skier, which means they can have an impaired lower limb or one or both arms impaired, is pretty easy to accommodate. You want to, especially for the lower limb deficiency, you want to make sure that the family has a source of equipment that they can keep all winter, so they can make modifications or work on fitting once and not have to do that over and over again. And you can talk to me if that's a problem getting the equipment. Otherwise, most activities are the same. So as you know, by what we've done so far, we do a lot without poles. And so if a skier has one or both arms that are impaired, they can certainly do most things without poles, and that's not much different than what the rest of the children are doing. Sit skiers, we can get equipment for sit skiers. This would be if you had both lower limbs deficient and you were in a chair where you can, that's attached to skis, and you use short poles to double pole. But we do have access to that equipment if you know of someone that's inquiring in your club that might need that. And then the third category is sight impaired. And there are many different levels of this. Some kids may function with a guide and some don't need a guide. And then the fourth consideration to pay attention to is children that aren't okay in super high stimulus situations. And some of our snowmaking loops especially can be very, very crowded. And so just make sure that if you have a child, or if a parent or the leader tells you that there's a child in your group that might need a little more space, to just respect that. Or maybe they want to do the whole lesson, but they don't want to play the group games and they just want to stand by and watch. That's something that we can certainly accommodate. I will say on the safety thing, I was skiing today on a man-made loop, 1 kilometer. I'm guessing there were at least 500 skiers on it. I do get very nervous about the smaller kids getting rear-ended. So the sweeper is very important on crowded snowmaking loops, to be behind a small child skier, because it is quite easy for them to get run over. So that sweeper role is super important on the crowded man-made snow loops. So in conclusion, the primary coach skills we're looking for are enthusiasm, having a little bit of understanding of group dynamics, understanding of those fundamental skills, which again, there were only 6, and an understanding of how games accomplish the development of those skills. So we are not looking for ski experts. Secondary coach skills, it'd be great if you had some personal ski technique, but truly not necessary, especially for levels 1 through 3. If you can walk around on your skis, you can have the skill level of a beginner and be a great level 1 through 3 coach. By the time you're in level 4, you would want to start having a bit more skill. You might have a harder time keeping up if you're not probably at the intermediate level in level 4. And then of course, 5 and 6 are our skating levels. And that's it. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so you guys can see me again. And so now we're just going to open things up to question and answer.
Hey, Amy, I have a question going back to the beginning about volunteers and the legal requirements.
Mm-hmm.
If we need a backup, I know there's a couple Saturdays that I'm going to be out of town. Should I search for a backup coach within the league only? And if I can't find one and I find a friend who may be willing to help, do they still go through the same volunteer registration process for a one-time sub?
Usually I would ask the leader how they want you to handle that. It wouldn't typically be up to you to find your own sub, but if you offered to do that or had, somebody in mind, the leader would certainly want to know that. but the sub would need to be at a very minimum registered and do the online abuse prevention training.
Okay, got it. So when you say the leader, you mean the club
The club
leaders?
leader, yeah. So each
Okay.
club, I want to emphasize this because it's a little bit confusing. So each club has a volunteer club leader. And if you don't know who that person is, you can find that name and their email on the club page. So if you go to mysl.org and then go to find a club, and then you click on the name of your club, you will find a bunch of information, including the name of your club leader. Okay, we got a few questions on the chat. Someone asked, I think I did all of the requirements, but will the leader of our club let me know if I miss something? So how this works, to be very transparent, is when you fill out the volunteer form, you go into pending status until we have your background check verified and we match up your abuse prevention quiz course completion with your registration. So that all takes a little while, but the leader can see you when you're in pending status. And so if you're missing something, you will be emailed on a couple of different fronts, but hopefully we're catching you if you haven't completed all the steps.
Hi, Amy. Quick question. I was wondering if kids ever show up without proper hat or mittens or gloves or buff, and what to do about that. Do we have
Yeah,
something? Yeah.
I would recommend, and I was kicking myself today because it was cold for the first time today when we skied, and we, had a few kids without muffs, which is such an easy problem to solve because all you need to do is put a couple of muffs in your pocket and then you can solve that problem. And so I would recommend that you keep a couple of spare muffs on you exactly for that situation. If it's really cold, if it's 0 degrees and windy or 10 degrees and windy and a child doesn't have a hat, I would not let them ski. I would actually send them home with their parent or send them inside. So, I mean, you can make that call as a coach. If you think it's a safety hazard to allow that child to go out that day, that's definitely something you can draw the line.
Okay.
If I can speak for just a minute, Jeremy, I've been coaching for a few years, and I usually carry a little backpack with a couple extra pairs of gloves, like small gloves, especially like those knit ones that'll kind of fit anyone. Sometimes even just an extra pair, like under a kid's gloves, is great. I'll carry like a bottle of water. There's invariably some kid who's like, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. So
Okay.
a couple of snacks, as I think Amy said, but almost like a Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts kit of all sorts of things that might lead to the lesson slowing down or stopping, and
Sure.
kind of keeps things moving along.
Excellent. Thank you.
And to the end with the snacks specifically with COVID concerns, I think like wrap snacks are one thing, right? If you have like a granola bar, fruit snacks, but I guess my question is what food can we provide to children? And what are the norms there? And do you need parent approval? And then also with the water, like, I don't know, like, sometimes you could carry like the unopened, like, I don't know, 6-ounce bottles. Like, what do you usually do there?
This is a good question because last year for COVID, we put a moratorium and it was basically no snacks, no how. But before that, it would be very common for coaches to have a pocket full of treats. I would say, you probably want to keep it simple sugar treats. So we're talking about hard candies or like fruit chews that are low on allergens. We don't actually have a policy on that. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it too much, but I think that some sugary stuff in your pocket is a good idea. More important than the water, though some kids will really complain about being thirsty. I do tell the parents of the older levels to make sure, that their children have water with them, but we know that that won't always happen. So it's probably a good idea to have, a couple of mini water bottles in your backpack.
And some of the clubs, you may be able to have a volunteer take the child back to the clubhouse. I don't know if they'll have water. I think it just probably depends on the park, right?
Yes. And I'm trying not to talk too much about that because the COVID rules are different at the facilities. And MYSL does not have a formal snack policy this year, meaning whether or not we're having group snacks, because it's likely different. You have to follow the rules of the facility that you're using, and that will not be equal for everyone. And so clubs will make the snack decision one at a time. So it'll be up to the clubs to make that decision. And yes, and someone points out, we want to stay away from nuts in all cases. It's fine if you bring that for your own child, a granola bar to eat afterwards, but we really shouldn't be sharing anything with nuts. But that's actually one of the things I talk about in the welcome sessions. And hopefully all parents know this, but this is super high calorie burning activity because of being outside in the cold and the full body activity. And so that hopefully the children are coming well fed, and then hopefully they're also getting snack while they're there. So it's really hard to eat too much during a ski day. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.